There's a meme out there on the web that I keep on seeing, and I keep on being slightly annoyed by it, actually. And that's the question, is free will an illusion? Apparently, there are millions of web citations on Google that make the claim that free will is an illusion. And of course, I have my doubts about that, but I don't have evidence for my doubts, whereas you do. So, what would you say?
All right. Um, well, I've talked to a lot of scientists who don't believe in free will and to a lot who do. And I mostly agree with both of them because they're not talking about the same thing. So the skeptics think free will means that the soul comes in and causes behavior, or that it bypasses the brain and there's no physical. I don't believe in any of that. And so, I mean, everything in psychology happens in the brain. Its brain is taking part in a higher system. So we have emergence. And the brain people will have trouble seeing free will because, nerve cell firing, there's no freedom there. But at higher levels of organization, there are more degrees of freedom. And so we evolved the capacity to capitalize on those. The scientists who believe in free will and the ones who don't, you might think they'd have really different psychological theories about how behavior happens. They don't. They seem to have pretty much the same belief. And the thing that gets me is they both agree that the human system is radically different from anything else in nature. And basically, we evolved some mental system to control our behavior that can plan for the future or celebrate the past or coordinate with others, import abstract ideas into the causation of behavior. All this has no precedent in the animal world. So evolution created this new set of mental powers. And the argument is just, does it deserve to be called free will? And that's a semantic argument. To me, the scientific challenge is let's figure out how this new things work and why it's there and why it went so far beyond what our closest ape relatives have. And I understand it work. In terms of whether I like the term or not, to me, the free is less of a problem than the will, because we don't really have a will in psychology. There's no such term. There's willpower, and people talk about being forced to do something against their will, but that's a metaphor. So I'd say we should use the term, maybe a bit ironically, but again, the problem is more the will. That some actions are freer than others. It seems indisputably true to me. We had an early study where we asked a sample of 100 people to describe one experience from your life when you acted of your own free will and one experience when you acted not of your own free will. And nobody said, I've never had such an experience, or I don't know what it means. Everybody could do that. I think that arguments get bogged down in a couple misleading places. One is there complete freedom. To be free, you'd have to show that no cause is applied. Well, I don't really think we need that. In science, almost everything's on a continuum. So some actions are freer than others, and we don't need the complete freedom case in there. Just what enables people to act more freely rather than less freely. So there is definitely a reality there. And if you want to quibble about whether the term free will, if we were just discovering this today, we'd probably come up with a different term. But given that the term's been used for centuries, I'd say we might as well connect with that scholarly tradition and that debate and continue using the term. And if you want to use it a bit ironically, that's fine.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So I do have a follow-up for that, because I think there is a psychological problem, or a psychological question rather, which would be, why do so many people want to believe they have free will? And there must be many millions of people. It could be culturally conditioned, but I even have some questions about that. That's an empirical question. But why do so many people get very upset when they hear psychologists and other people claim that there's no such thing as free will, and of course they interpret free will in their own terms? when they hear that.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well, the importance of free will, I think, originates at the level of society, not at the individual brain. We want people to be responsible for their actions. Moral responsibility is an important component of society and something people care about. And when people act not of their own free will, we don't condemn them if they do bad things. So it kind of implies to people if we don't have free will, if we're just robots, we shouldn't hold anybody responsible for their actions. We can't. Even morality seems moral judgments are essentially, should you have acted differently in that situation, which presupposes that you could have acted differently. Right. Which is scientific definition of free will, is the ability to act differently in the same situation.
I see. Good. That's obviously something that is observable, so it's scientifically useful.
Yes. Yeah, if you convince them that they don't have free will, in some studies they become more likely to do immoral things, lying and cheating and so on. They also are less prone to punish people who do terrible things because, again, I mean, the legal system embraces this to some degree. I think the Supreme Court commented that free will is an important part of America's legal system. Yeah. Whether the person acted freely or not is a factor in how to judge the person and how to sentence the person, to punish the person if they did something wrong.
Right. Yeah. So it's very fundamental. I would say it's fundamental both philosophically, culturally, and legally. And obviously, if you disagree, please say so. And it is, I haven't counted the citations on Google on the question, is there free will? Am I free? Those kinds of questions. But my guess is that the citation rate has to be something enormous. And I believe that the reason is that people really do care about that. And obviously, that's an empirical claim. We could ask people about that, and it might actually be a good idea. And it's the compelling nature of this and the high popularity of this question, not so much the conviction, but rather the troubles that people seem to go through in thinking through free will or their conception of free will, that kind of piques my curiosity.
Yes. Well, we talked about Freud a couple of minutes ago. One of his contributions to the culture was that you sometimes don't know why you're doing what you're doing. Right. It's easy to have sort of the naive impression that your conscious mind is completely in control of everything you do. Right. And I think, well, often it is. But Freud was certainly right. There are unconscious things, and people might do something for a reason they aren't aware. I know the habits researchers talk about habit slips, like you're driving to work and you intend to stop somewhere else today to go to a different route to go by the drugstore. But caught up in the conversation and you just go past it. You go the way you always go. Yep. So these show that sometimes the conscious mind doesn't really know what you're doing, isn't fully in charge. So that's a little bit unsettling. For these people to come along and say there's no free will at all, that everything you do is pre-programmed, and indeed, back in 1900, everything was already inevitable. Everything you're going to do or say your whole life was already in the causal process and inevitable. That makes them think, well, am I living my life, or am I just sort of going through the motions like a pre-programmed robot? So there's a big loss of dignity when you tell people they're not free to make their own choices, or they're not really in control. Right.